Hi everyone, this is a very brief summary of Chapter 1 of the book Applied Behavior Analysis, 2nd edition by Cooper, Heron, and Heward. The first chapter speaks about science, and it basically says the science refers to a systematic approach for seeking and organizing knowledge about the natural world. There are three levels of understanding when it comes to science. The first one is description. And basically, description is a systematic observations enhances the understanding of a given phenomenon by enabling scientists to describe it accurately. And then prediction, and it's a second level of scientific understanding, and it occurs when repeated observations reveal that two events consistently covary with each other. And when systematic covariation between two events is found, this relationship, termed a correlation, can be used to predict the relative probability that one event will occur based on the presence of the other one. And then the third is control. And it's the ability to predict with a certain degree of confidence. Therefore, there's control when you're able to manipulate one variable and predict the change in the second variable. Then the chapter talks about the attitudes of science, and there are 6 of them. The first one is determinism, and it's basically the idea that our world is a lawful, orderly, and nothing happens out of nowhere. There are no accidents, and everything has an explanation, and every phenomena has a reason. Then empiricism, it's a scientific knowledge is built on, above all, is empiricism, and it's basically the practice of objective observation of the phenomena of interest. It's basically looking at or making objective observations, no subjective or opinions related to the observations we're making. It has to be empirical and based on objective findings. And then experimentation, it's basically the basic research or experiments we do to understand our science better, and control for any extraneous variables when trying to understand the function relations. Philosophical doubt is a fourth one. It basically means that our attitude is usually asking more questions and doubting our findings in terms of wanting to understand more and doubting that that's the whole truth or the whole truth, and that there's more to study and more to know. So always asking questions to know more about the science or the phenomena. Parsimony is that we usually will look at the logical, simple explanations of the phenomenon before going into more abstract and complicated explanations. Replication is that the science has to be, researchers or practitioners are able to replicate the science, so everything has to be documented in a very precise manner in order for somebody to redo it or replicate it. The chapter goes on talking about a brief history of applied behavior analysis development, and the first person that spoke about or had the idea of behaviorism was John Watson in 1900s about the stimulus response psychology. And some recognize psychology as a field of behavior in early the 20th century, but Watson was the first spokesman for this new direction in the field of psychology. He wrote the article "Psychology as a Behaviorist Views It," and Watson basically mentions that our behaviors or responses are due to what happens before the behaviors, the stimulus that happen before the behaviors. For example, the light of the room changes, your pupil size or shape will change. So whatever happened before caused your pupil, the eye pupil change. So things like that, that things in the environment makes our behavior happen or change. And then this was basically the beginning of behaviorism, which is one branch of behavior analysis, and it's the philosophy of the science of behavior. Then Skinner, B.F. Skinner, 1938, Radical Behaviorism and the Three-Term Contingency, Stimulus, Response, Stimulus. He named his new science the Experimental Analysis of Behavior. He published The Behavior of Organisms. It included lab research conducted from 1930 to 1937. He spoke about two kinds of behaviors, respondent and operant. And respondent was basically the things that happen to us that were not learned. It's basically our human nature, or like for example salivating when we put food in our mouth, things like that, biological reactions or responses. However, he also spoke about operant, which or he was the one to speak about operant, which is learned behavior, and that's why he was the first one to say that behaviors are shaped based on also what happens after them. So he added the next stimulus after the response, and of course that was the first one to speak about behaviors changing in the future based on the consequences. And of course Skinner was the first one, or he's the one who found the experimental analysis of behavior, which is basic research branch of the science. After that, Fuller in 1949 was he did one of the first studies that spoke about operant behavior or applied behavior analysis using humans as the participant of the study and not animals. And in this study, basically there was a person with an intellectual disability, has also physical impairments, and what Fuller did was that every time this individual moves his left arm a little bit, he would put sugar and milk liquid into his mouth through a syringe, and he found that by doing this, his hand or his arm stretches more than before and for longer periods of time. And that was first, again, a study used human figures to do ABA or apply ABA to humans. Then in 1959, Allen and Michael's paper were written or published, and it's called The Psychiatric Nurse as a Behavior Engineer. And again, this was about a psychiatric nurse who used applied behavior analysis to help a group of elderly socialize and work together in different activities. And then there are two events that happened in 1968. The first one, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis began publication, and then the second event was the publication of the article Some Current Dimensions of Applied Behavior Analysis in 1968. And by all these events, we have the third branch of behavior analysis, which is applied behavior analysis. And it is developing and applying a technology for improving behavior. The chapter, well, these are the three branches: behaviorism, the philosophy of the science, experimental analysis of behavior, the studies or the research that were done to understand what is behaviorism, and then finally applied behavior analysis, the application or the use of the science to improve from people's lives and change behaviors and work on behaviors. And then the chapter talks about the 7 characteristics of applied behavior analysis, and these are, we can remember them by the phrase "get a cap." So the first one is generality, and it basically means that the behavior change has to be general, or it has to be generalized to different environments and generalized even to different behaviors, not just to the environment or the place where it was initially taught. So it becomes part of the human repertoire as a new behavior. So it has to be generalized and ability to be used in different ways, in different places. The second one is effective, and effective basically means that it's effective, it's taught in a way that is socially appropriate, and basically makes a difference in someone's environment, and it's practical, and it can be used and a person can gain from it. And then technological, which means it can be replicated. So if you have done a program for a child and you cannot continue working with this child, the next person who can come in can replicate what you've been doing with the child. Or if you're doing a study and the next person want to do more on your study or continue what you've started, you really have to document everything in a very technological manner to be replicated. So technological means people are able to replicate it and do it again. Applied means it's basically affecting the human environment and life, and it's affecting improvements in behaviors that enhance and improve from people's everyday life. Conceptually systematic means every strategy or intervention you're doing has to be based on the principles of behavior analysis. So as much as you can use diverse strategies, ways, methods to intervene to help a person, all these strategies that you've come up with or used have to be based on the principles of behavior analysis. So it's conceptually systematic. Analytic, and it's basically you are able to find a functional relation between the manipulated events and a reliable change in some measurable dimension of the target behavior. So you're able to control a study or a program by changing one variable in order to change the other, and you're able to analyze. So it's in a way you're doing an analysis of behavior by trying to understand and control the function relation and manipulate it to basically help a client change from a behavior or learn a new behavior. Behavioral. So behavioral basically means that the behavior chosen is the behavior that needs to be used or changed. So you're really focusing on the right behavior to change when you're working with a client or working with a person. The behavior must also be measurable, so you're able to measure it, so you'll be reliable and the data will be reliable. And then also behavioral means it's basically any changes in behavior can be seen, and when behaviors are investigated, you're not just focusing on one person's behavior, but the behaviors of all the others around him, because again, behaviors of people in the environment can impact a specific person's behavior or target behavior. So you're really looking at all behaviors, the client, his parents, maybe his teachers, everyone around him. So applied behavior analysis has to be behavioral, or one of the characteristics is behavioral, meaning it really focuses on behaviors and what's happening in terms of other behaviors in the person's environment. Some additional characteristics of applied behavior analysis. Accountable meaning reliable. You're able to So you rely on measurements and basically reevaluation of your program and continuous monitoring of what you're doing to make sure you're successful, and if not, you have to understand what went wrong and try to change it. The second one is public. Everything is straightforward, explicit to the public. There's no metaphysical explanations or something like that. Doable when you're working with different kinds of people and different professionals. You're able to ask them to do things like collecting data or doing applied behavior analysis or intervening in some way. Your requests your requests has to be doable to them and very simple and clear. Empowering. So ABA gives practitioners real tools that work. So knowing how to do something and having the tools to accomplish it instills confidence in practitioners. So it's empowering in this way. Optimistic. Applied behavior analysis is optimistic because we don't believe in internal characteristics of individuals, and therefore they're roughly equal and they have equal potential. So once intervention is created based on understanding the environmental factors, we are able to design some prevention and intervention programs to improve the outcomes. So there's no magic, there's no internal characteristics that's hidden that we have to look for. So it's optimistic in this manner. Also, direct and continuous measurement enables practitioners to detect small improvements in performance that might otherwise be overlooked if we don't have measurements. Also, it's optimistic because the more often a practitioner uses behavior tactics with positive outcomes, the more optimistic this individual will be and try to do more work in the future. Finally, peer-reviewed literature provides many examples of success in teaching students who had been considered unteachable before and who all have severe delays and were not really cared for as much because of the idea that there's nothing that can help them. So applied behavior analysis, or at least the studies that we look at, are showed us otherwise, and that these individuals can benefit from behavior programming and behavior plans. So these are the 4 reasons why it's optimistic. Finally, the definition of applied behavior analysis is a science in which tactics drift from the principles of behavior are applied systematically to improve socially significant behavior, and experimentation is used to identify the variables responsible for behavior change. This is just a very brief summary of my own understanding to Chapter 1. Thank you.